And for more on our special coverage, we hand it over to Karina Huber, who is, of course, standing by in New York. Hi, Karina.
Thanks, Phil. Well, yeah, for more on the U.S.-China strategic and economic dialogue, we're joined by Patrick Chovanec. He's the managing director and chief strategist at Silvercrest Asset Management, and Rick New, who's been on the show many times, the president of Starr Strategic Partners. Thank you for joining us. Let's start with you, Patrick. I mean, this is nothing new. We've been seeing these talks happening for 7 years, but tensions have been rising between the two countries over issues in the South China Sea and cybersecurity issues as well. How would you categorize the sort of mood at this year's meeting?
I think the conversations were frank. I think that obviously in front of the cameras they emphasized productive talks and things that they could agree on. But really, in some ways, the most important things were the things that they disagreed on. And I don't think that we should judge these type of dialogues based on the takeaways or the things that they agreed on. Very frequently, it's important to have discussions about things like the South China Sea or cybersecurity that we all know that China and the U.S. are not going to come to agreement on, but it's very important that they talk, and the signals that are sent in both directions are quite important.
What do you think sort of is a take-home of the talks this year?
Well, I think overall the expectation, at least from the business community, is that this will be a precursor to the presidential summit coming up in September. Lots of expectation on that front, especially bilateral investment treaty. I don't think the business community in the United States or Europe really expect that a lot to be accomplished at this stage. But more to come in the next 2 to 3 months. And we know the dates now for September visits.
Right, so everybody's eyeing the September visit. But as you mentioned, there's sort of not high expectations for these kinds of talks. Is that normal? Right. I mean, is that what happens every year? We don't really get many concrete agreements during the talks, but it's sort of the appetizer to the main course, which is when we have Xi Jinping coming to visit in September. That's when they come out with the big announcements. So was it wrong for us to expect anything dramatic or really concrete coming out of these talks?
Well, it would be nice to see progress towards a bilateral investment treaty or actually the announcement of a treaty. And I think a lot of people in the business community would love to see that. But I think actually there's a lot of concern in the foreign business community right now about the business climate in China. And they're actually to just maintain the status quo in some ways and keep the dialogue flowing. Because there was a lot of concern, for instance, earlier this year about Chinese efforts to limit access for American technology. Actually, in some ways, the biggest opposition that came from Chinese banks that said we actually need this technology. But I really do think that there is a sobriety right now in the foreign business community in China that recognizes that, well, while it may not be possible to progress, they don't want to regress.
Well, as you mentioned, there are concerns about access among U.S. companies getting access to the Chinese market. They say that Beijing unfavorably favors Chinese companies. But at the same time, the Chinese government also says that in the U.S., they're having difficulty accessing certain industries in the U.S., technology, for example, because of national security concerns. In light of that, though, is there a chance that we're going to get this bilateral investment treaty back on track? Because it started in 2008. Right. Where does it stand right now? It's sort of...
Well, in the last round, the Chinese agreed to the notion of two things. One is negative list, and the other is national treatment, essentially for foreign entrants into China. I think those two mechanics have been promulgated by the United States for many years. So those were very positive progress pieces in the last round. I think this time around, further exchange of the negative list took place actually 2 days ago. Still rather long, as far as we're concerned, but that is a progress, piece forward. We think the Chinese, as one of the world's largest and toughest negotiators, would not give you really their bottom line early on in the process. Neither do we. So this is just part of the progress here. I do not expect for this to be fully finalized when the president from China visits us here in the D.C. and New York area, but more progress should be expected.
And I mean, is that the area where you see the most potential, is in the relationship, the economic relationship between the U.S. and China right now? I mean, they have other issues dealing with South China Seas, as we mentioned, but do you think that that is the potential for us to keep things calm is through business?
That is the thing that's on the table right now, and it's important to maintain it on the table and keep talking about how to progress. I do think that one other positive area is that originally, when the U.S. came out with TPP, its free trade agreement in the Pacific, and when China came out with the AIIB, the infrastructure bank, both sides viewed the other's proposal as a threat. And I think that both sides have kind of scaled that back a little bit. where they may not be entirely happy with the other side's proposal, but they realize that they're not going to be able to stop it on either side, and they're going to have to somehow come to terms with it. And I think that that actually is a positive thing, because it was really creating some real negativity.
Right. Well, China's finance minister says that the door of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is open to the U.S. and Japan, but both those countries are not interested in that. So how do you interpret that? Why are they taking that stance?
Well, I think, first of all, the American government misread and mishandled the situation from A to Z, which is unfortunate. That said, I'm not sure even if America as a country would like to participate, there is enough money here to really invest in a massive magnitude. AIIB aside, I agree with Patrick that the overarching economic relationship between our two countries is paramount. Trade and investment bilaterally creates not only jobs and economic prosperity, but also peace, and we do not want wars. When you think about U.S.-China relations, for example, is also very key in the context of TPP or AIIB, other Asian countries in the region, in Asia. They would love to see the President of the United States, which is always there, for security and many other economic reasons. But what they do not want to see is tensions rising between China and the United States, or anything that will force those Asian countries to pick sides. So a hostile dynamic is not constructive to anybody.
Okay, looking forward, come September, what do you expect to be accomplished? As you said, you don't expect the bilateral agreement to be finalized by then.
Fully finalized.
Fully finalized. But what big announcement should we sort of be looking forward to in terms of the relationship, I guess, economic relationship between the two countries?
Well, here's what I hope for, and this does affect the economy of both countries, is some kind of serious discussion on cybersecurity. I know that the two sides are far apart. The finger pointing isn't really helpful. What they need to do is talk about the rules of the road. And this is where we did have an announcement of a working group that would try to define some rules of the road. There may be areas where the U.S. and China, despite their differences, actually have some common interests here and can define, put the things that we disagree with aside and define some areas where we do agree and we can define some rules of the road. That would be significant progress.
Well, it all starts, of course, with the dialogue. Thank you so much for joining us, Rick New, and Patrick Chovanec, Managing Director and Chief Strategist at Silvercrest Asset Management.